If you've been carrying a quiet sense of shame after your divorce, you're not alone. Today, I want to talk about where that shame comes from and why it was never ours to carry. This shame usually isn't about the divorce itself. I think it's about the expectations we were taught to carry, how sacrifice is related to success, especially for women who were raised to hold a marriage together at all cost. The ending can feel like a personal failure, as if our life has become a failure. As an Indian woman raised with strong cultural expectations around marriage and responsibility, this was something I had to untangle within myself. In this video, I want to gently explore how I learned from my own experiences of divorce, where that shame comes from, how it gets internalized, and what it might look like to begin releasing it without forcing forgiveness or rushing healing. Many of us, especially women, carry a quiet sense of shame after divorce, even when we can't quite explain where it's coming from. It sometimes shows up in subtle ways in how we talk about ourselves or in how cautious we become around other people. We tend to shrink around others, or sometimes wanting to not be noticed too much. We may even avoid being around people or community we were part of because of the way they talk about divorce or the way they talk about divorcees. Or some of us may even feel like we can't be seen happy. To understand where this kind of shame comes from, I think it helps to look at how many of us were raised. I grew up in a middle class Indian family in a generation where keeping a marriage and family together was deeply valued. And when that didn't happen, it often felt not only as a personal failure, but a failure for the entire family. That message came from many places. For example, the Indian movies I watched growing up, where the movies frequently conveyed messages about how you are successful or even a good parent only if you stay married. And sometimes the message came from within the family, the way divorces and divorcees were spoken about within my own family and community, the church I attended. All of that quietly shaped how I understood marriage, success, and self worth. Some of you might hear this and think, yes, that sounds familiar. And if you do, I want you to know you're not alone in carrying this. This kind of shame often shows up in really subtle ways. For me, it showed up in how I slowly started pulling back from people, not wanting to see anyone, even people I cared about and loved, like my own parents sometimes, because I felt like I failed them. I felt this deep shame in not being able to stay married uh, to that one person for the rest of my life. It shows up in the mind too, that constant replay going over what we could have done differently, what we should have said, the mistakes we keep going back to month after month, and sometimes even year after year. We usually just call these negative thoughts, but often I've noticed underneath them, it's actually shame. Shame about how we showed up, shame about the choices we made. And sometimes it turns into this deeper belief that we are no longer worthy of love or respect. And if you're a mother, that shame can feel even heavier. It can turn into this belief that you didn't do what was best for your children. even when we deep down know the situation or the marriage was far more complicated than that. And I want to pause here for a moment because none of this means you're a failure or that your life is a failure. And it also doesn't mean you're stuck. This shame or these thoughts keep coming up only because many of us were taught to hold things together, to sacrifice, to endure, to keep going at all cost. And marriage is meaningful to many of us. So when something like that ends, we feel like we failed at holding a relationship together. And as a woman, this conditioning can really turn into patterns of self blame and self shame. And none of us were born with these feelings of shame. It formed over time um, through the messages we absorbed about what it means to be a good partner, a good woman, a good mother, a good friend, good daughter. And in yoga, there's a teaching that pain is part of being human, but suffering comes from the stories we attach to that pain. So the pain of divorce is real. That loss deserves to be honored. But shame is the story we layer on top of it. And stories, especially the ones we learned a long time ago, can and should be questioned. A simple way to start questioning these stories is to ask where they came from. When a thought like, I'm a failure, or I should have held it together no matter what shows up, pause and ask yourself, where did I learn this? Did it come from how your parents talked about marriage? From what you heard growing up in your family about divorce? Maybe it came from religion or community expectations, or from the movies or stories that showed what a love story and success were supposed to look like. When you trace the thought back to its source, something really important happens. We begin to see that this belief wasn't created by you, it was absorbed by you. And once we see that, the thought loses some of its authority. It's no longer this absolute truth about who you are. It becomes just one message among many that shaped you. And that doesn't mean we dismiss or push away these thoughts. It just means we stop letting them define our worth. Once you begin to notice that these thoughts are stories the mind learned, the next step isn't to fight them or try to make them stop. The first step is simply to pause. When a thought like, I failed or I ruined everything comes up, pause and name it. You can say something like, when that thought shows up, say, this is a story, or this is an old belief showing up. And then ask one simple question. Is this a fact or is this an interpretation? The divorce is a fact. The heartbreak is a fact. But I am unworthy or I am a failure, that's an interpretation. Let me repeat that again. The divorce is a fact. The heartbreak is a fact. But I am unworthy or I am a failure, that's an interpretation. And we don't need to replace the thought or convince ourselves of something else. Just noticing the difference creates a little space. And from that space, we can ask one more question. What would I say to someone I love if they were in this situation? And that question isn't meant to fix the feeling. It's meant to soften the way we speak to ourselves in that moment. And over time, I believe this practice will help you to stop taking every painful thought as the truth. And that's how we can loosen the grip of shame around divorce, around a heartbreak. And don't get me wrong, we can, and it's often healthy to reflect on our past actions, on where we may have hurt someone or how we might have handled things differently. But that reflection is not the same as believing we are unworthy of love or respect because of a divorce or a heartbreak. And this is really the practice of Atma-Karuna in Sanskrit, which is translated to self-compassion. You don't have to get this right. Even just noticing, even just pausing can start to change the way you relate to your own mind. And I want to add one more gentle reminder here. From a yogic perspective, marriage is meaningful. And this union can be an opportunity for our spiritual growth. But it is also just one aspect of a human life. We're not defined by a single role or relationship. I believe we are spiritual beings with purpose and consciousness that extend far beyond one chapter. So when a marriage ends, it doesn't mean our life ended. It means one part of our life changed. The pain of that change is real, and it deserves care. But your worth, your capacity to love, your ability to grow, those were never contained in one role. We are more than what happened to us, more than what didn't work, more than the identities we once held. And when we can begin to see that, even just a little, the story starts to loosen. Not because the marriage didn't matter, but because you matter beyond it. If any of this resonated, take it gently with you. You don't have to rush it or figure it all out right now. Till next time, be kind to yourself. Stay wise, stay curious, and may your path be guided by love.